Hi guys, welcome back to the second video on my channel, and today we'll be asking the question, can a diesel really be considered a hot hatch? The MK1 Fabia VRS was sold between 2003 and 2007, and over that time period it sold around 11,000 cars, I believe. So in 2007, when production finally came to an end, Skoda decided to make this particular model, which is an SE special edition, just to celebrate the popularity of the car. They made it a limited production car, so they made 1,000 of them in total. The key differences between the special edition and the normal VRS were probably the seats, the cruise control standard, and of course this special racing blue colour that they come in. This was unique to the VRS SE and probably, in my opinion, one of the best colours you can get them in. Along with the interior as well, with the full leather interior, it's actually quite a nice place to be. The car follows all the normal hallmarks or traits of a hot hatch. You've got practicality, it's great on fuel. In fact, it's fantastic on fuel. It returns around, they reckon, 60 mpg. I think this at the moment is reading about 51.9, but that's with quite harsh driving. So you can imagine if you drove this on a run, it would get around 60 mpg as they claim. And that's all thanks to the 1.9 TDI engine. When you think of what a hot hatch really is, you think of a small, fun, light, nimble, and quite practical car. And this ticks every single one of them. The key difference being, of course, the engine up front. So rather than putting in a petrol engine that all its power's up top and you kind of race to get there, Skoda decided to put in the 1.9 TDI, PD130 I believe, to most of these cars. And whilst a diesel engine doesn't sound like it should work in a hot hatch, I think it does. When you drive a hot hatch, you expect to chase the power to the red line, to be on the limit the whole time, but with this you don't need to. All the torque kicks in from around 2000 RPM, so you never really have to spend all of your time chasing the power at the top end. Now of course this is great for overtaking, it's great for everyday driving, but it does beg the question whether or not you can really drive this car on the limit. Where the power stops in this, it sort of just begins in a lot of other hot hatches, and some people might like that, some people may not. Personally, I think this works. One of the great things as well about the 1.9 TDI engine is that it's incredibly tunable. There's a lot of companies that tune them. They put them in Volkswagens and Seats and of course Skodas. So the amount of places you can go to get parts, aftermarket parts and modifications is really vast. So you know the modding potential for the car and the engine itself is really tunable, so it's great. So this car does actually have some of those modifications that are quite common in the Fabia VRS world. It's got a dark side development exhaust, a dark side development front mount intercooler. It's had some upgraded head bolts because head lift is common in these, especially when you map them to a bit more power. Now the owner of this isn't sure whether or not it's been mapped. We think it has. It feels as if it has. We reckon it's around 160 horsepower. So it's probably what you would call stage one, although I don't really like those terms because I think they're a bit pointless. But it's got a hybrid Garrett turbo in it. The reason for that was because the OE or the OEM turbo failed or started to go. There was quite a lot of wear on it, so the owner decided to go for a hybrid turbo. And with the modifications that are on it now, so the intercooler, the exhaust system, those uprated bolts, the modding potential and the remap potential, we think this would probably be around 230 horsepower with another remap due to the previewing mods and the uprated turbo. All of that power and all of that torque, even though it's only 160 horsepower, makes getting 260 more effortless. And you probably heard that as well as another thing. It's got a popcorn limiter on it, which is quite a common thing. Some people love it, some people hate it. I don't really drive this car all that often, and I've just done it there and it's made me giggle, so it says it all really. That diesel engine makes driving pretty effortless. car's also running aftermarket suspension. I believe they're coilovers. They're not the best brand in the world, but they certainly make the car quite firm to drive as it is. I think that obviously the standard OE suspension would be a bit softer than this, because this is actually quite harsh, and you're probably picking that up in the camera wobble at the moment. But it still handles great, turning's brilliant. The traction control light does come on and sort of hold you back when you try and fire out of a corner as standard, but I'm sure you can turn that off if you wanted to. But again, like most front wheel drive hot hatches, if you're going to put a ton of power in them, it probably makes sense to put a diff in them as well, because otherwise that power really is only usable in a straight line. Having a diesel engine in a hot hatch might not be everyone's cup of tea, but when you drive the VRS, you can't help but feel that it ticks every single box, even though it doesn't have that petrol engine. It's not the be-all and end-all. This car, despite that, has character, it's fun to drive, it'll put a smile on your face, and it one-ups every other hot hatch because it will return 60 mpg on a run, and you can't say that about any of the hot hatches that are coming out now, even the smaller engine Mark 8 Fiesta STs, etc. They've still got petrol engines and they'll never return the same mpg as this. With the interior stripped out the back and the exhaust and all the modifications, the car is incredibly loud. That's exactly what you want from a hot hatch, so what more could you ask for? Unless of course you want to drive the car every day, then it might be a problem.